It didn't begin with chaos. There was no explosive headline, no viral clip that instantly forced the world to stop and stare. Instead, it started quietly, almost subtly, the kind of situation that lingers in the background before anyone fully realizes it has taken shape. When Tasha K first spoke on Claressa Papoose, it didn't feel like a defining moment. But what followed proved that it didn't need to be loud to become significant. Because sometimes the most powerful shifts begin in silence. Before her voice entered the conversation, something was already building. It wasn't obvious. There were no confirmations, no direct statements, just a growing sense of curiosity. People had started noticing things, small interactions, subtle moments that didn't quite align in a way that felt random. None of it was strong enough to stand on its own, but together, it created a pattern that was difficult to ignore. And once people begin noticing patterns, even the smallest details can start to feel meaningful. For someone like Claressa, this kind of attention felt out of place. Her reputation wasn't built on speculation or controversy. It was built inside the ring, through discipline, focus, and undeniable skill. She had spent years proving herself, earning respect not through conversation, but through performance. Her image reflected that, controlled, determined, and centered on her own journey. So when her name started appearing in discussions that had nothing to do with her career, it created a disconnect. People weren't just curious. They were surprised. On the other side stood Papoose, whose public image carried a completely different kind of weight. His name had become almost synonymous with loyalty, largely due to his long-standing relationship with Remy Ma. For years, he had been viewed as someone who stood firm, someone who remained consistent, even when circumstances were difficult. That reputation wasn't just part of his public persona. It was something people genuinely believed defined him. So when his name became linked to uncertainty, it didn't just raise eyebrows. It challenged a perception that had been built over time. At first, the situation remained relatively contained. People weren't rushing to conclusions. They were observing, waiting to see if anything concrete would emerge. But curiosity rarely stays quiet. The more people paid attention, the more conversations began to form. And those conversations didn't rely on facts alone. They were shaped by perception, by how things appeared, by how moments felt when viewed from the outside. And perception is powerful, because even in the absence of confirmation, it allows people to create their own versions of the story. Versions that feel real, even when they are built on incomplete information. That's how narratives begin, not always from truth, but from interpretation. Everything shifted when Tasha K stepped into the situation. Her approach wasn't cautious. It wasn't framed with hesitation. It was direct, confident, and delivered with a tone that made people stop and listen. She didn't need to provide every detail. What mattered was the energy behind her words. The certainty. The implication that there was more beneath the surface. That's what changed everything. Because people don't just react to information, they react to how it's presented. And when something is delivered with confidence, it carries weight, regardless of how much is actually confirmed. Suddenly, what had once been speculation started to feel like something more. Not proven, not verified, but significant enough to take seriously. From that point forward, the conversation expanded rapidly. Social media filled with reactions, breakdowns, and opinions. People began revisiting past moments, analyzing old clips, reinterpreting interactions that once seemed insignificant. It's a strange shift. How something ordinary can take on new meaning when viewed through a different lens. For Claressa, this shift brought a kind of pressure she wasn't used to. The pressure of competition is structured. It has rules, boundaries, clear objectives. This was different. This was unpredictable, personal, outside of her control. Every move became subject to interpretation. Every silence became a question. Every response carried the risk of being misunderstood. And that kind of attention can feel overwhelming no matter how strong someone is. For Papoose, the pressure took on a different form. It wasn't immediate or explosive. It built slowly, almost quietly, but with increasing weight. When your identity in the public eye is tied so closely to a specific idea, loyalty, consistency, integrity, even a hint of doubt can feel significant. Not because it proves anything, but because it introduces uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads quickly. It doesn't arrive as a direct accusation. It enters through questions, through tone, through subtle shifts in how people talk about you. One comment becomes many. A single observation turns into a broader discussion. And before long, people begin re-examining everything they thought they understood. Old interviews resurface. Past statements are compared against present reactions. Even moments that once seemed neutral are revisited with a sense that they might reveal something new. It becomes less about what is happening now and more about what might have been missed before. That's what makes situations like this so complex. Because the public doesn't just consume the present, they reconstruct the past. They search for patterns, for connections, for signs that validate the narrative they are beginning to believe. And once that process begins, it becomes difficult to contain. For Papoose, that meant navigating a space where every action carried added significance. Speaking out risked fueling the conversation. Staying silent risked reinforcing it. There was no neutral ground. Every choice became part of the narrative. And that's where the real pressure lies. Not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of many. The steady build of attention, speculation, and interpretation. The feeling that your name is being discussed in ways that are no longer fully within your control. Meanwhile, the role of Tasha K in all of this continued to shape the direction of the conversation. Her involvement didn't just amplify the situation, it redefined it. What had once been a quiet curiosity turned into a public debate. People weren't just observing anymore. They were engaging, taking sides, defending their perspectives with confidence, even in the absence of clear answers. And the internet responded in the way it always does, quickly, loudly, and with division. Some accepted what was being suggested without hesitation, viewing it as confirmation of what they already suspected. Others pushed back, questioning credibility and urging caution. And then there were those caught in between, uncertain of what to believe, trying to make sense of a story that didn't have a clear resolution. But uncertainty doesn't weaken a narrative. In many ways, it strengthens it. Because what keeps people engaged isn't always clarity. It's the possibility that there's more to uncover. The idea that something remains hidden just beneath the surface. And in this case, that feeling became the driving force behind the conversation. Each new reaction added another layer. Each new opinion extended the life of the story. And even without definitive answers, the discussion continued to grow. At a certain point, it became clear that this wasn't just about Claressa Papoose or even Tasha K anymore. It was about something larger, about how quickly narratives can form, how easily they can spread, and how powerful they become once they take hold in the public consciousness. Because there is always a space between truth and perception, and that space can be difficult to navigate, even for the people directly involved. They may understand their own reality. They may know what is true and what isn't. But the version of the story that exists publicly can take on a life of its own, one that doesn't always align with reality. And that's what makes situations like this so intense. It's not just about what was said. It's about how it was received, how it was interpreted, how it reshaped the way people see individuals who had, until that point, been viewed through a very different lens. Because sometimes, all it takes is one voice entering a conversation to change its direction completely. And right now, that's where things remain. Unresolved, still evolving, still surrounded by questions that don't yet have clear answers. But as long as that sense of mystery exists, the attention won't fade. People will keep watching, keep speculating, keep trying to piece together a story that may be far more complicated than it first appeared. And in the end, that may be the most defining part of all. Not what is known, but what continues to be questioned.